By dawn, Eira Thornvale was no longer a wolf. She was prey. The elders didn't banish her. They did something worse. They marked her and stepped aside. No alpha claimed her. No pack offered shelter. So Eira ran. Past the last boundary stone. Past the warnings carved into bone. Into the land every wolf feared. The feral territory. That was where Kael Ravencrown found her. He didn't bare his teeth. He didn't scent her weakness. He only said one thing. You crossed into my lands unarmed. Eira waited for death. Instead, Kael turned his back on the council, and offered her shelter without a claim. A choice no alpha had ever survived making. Before the story goes any further, tap subscribe and like if you enjoy werewolf tales like this. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? I love seeing how far these stories travel. The elders circled Eira at dawn, their voices low and ceremonial. She didn't fight. Fighting proved guilt. Elder Morvain pressed a thumb to Eira's throat, cold, deliberate, and withdrew it stained with ash and oil. The mark settled into her skin like a brand that wouldn't burn. Eira Thornvale, Morvain announced to the gathered pack, you are released from obligation. Released. Not banished. Not exiled. The distinction mattered. Banishment meant the pack still acknowledged you existed. Release meant you were already gone. No alpha stepped forward to claim her. Not one. They stood in a half-circle, arms crossed, eyes carefully neutral. She'd expected anger, disgust, something. Instead, they gave her nothing. Not even denial. Eira's mother turned her back first. Then her sister. Then the others, one by one, until Eira stood alone in the center of the gathering ground with the mark cooling on her throat. She understood what they'd done. By law, no alpha was required to shelter an omega released from pack bond. By law, anyone could claim her. By law, she had until nightfall to find protection. But laws were only as merciful as the wolves who wrote them. Where will you go? A voice murmured behind her. Eira turned. It was Garrett, a younger wolf she'd once helped through a hunting injury. His eyes flicked to the treeline, then back. A warning. I heard Thorn and his brothers talking, he whispered. They're waiting past the ridge. They'll give you until sunset. Then. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Eira's chest tightened, but she kept her face still. Thank you. Garrett flinched like she'd struck him and walked away. The pack dispersed. Within minutes, the gathering ground was empty except for the scorch marks from the elders' fire and the scent of ash still clinging to Eira's skin. She had two choices. Stay and become prey by nightfall. Or run into the one place no wolf would follow. The feral lands. Eira looked north, toward the boundary stones that marked the edge of pack territory. Beyond them lay miles of forest that belonged to no council, no law, no alpha who answered to anyone. Wolves who crossed into feral lands didn't come back. But wolves who stayed here and were hunted didn't survive either. Eira pulled her cloak tighter and started walking. The boundary stones were older than the packs, carved with warnings in a language Eira couldn't read. She stepped past them without ceremony and kept moving. The forest swallowed sound. No birds. No wind. Just the muffled crunch of her boots on frozen ground and the hammer of her own heartbeat. She didn't know how far she'd gone when her legs gave out. Eira sank against a tree, pulling her knees to her chest. The mark on her throat throbbed. Her breath came shallow and fast, fogging the air in front of her. She closed her eyes. If death came, let it be quick. Behind her, a branch snapped. Heavy. Deliberate. Eira's eyes flew open. She couldn't see him yet, but she felt him. The weight of his presence pressed against her like a hand at her back. Footsteps. Closer. Then a voice, low and controlled. You crossed into my lands unarmed. Eira didn't move. The feral alpha had found her. Eira didn't turn around. The footsteps stopped 3 paces behind her. Close enough to strike. Far enough to choose not to. Stand up. The voice wasn't harsh. That somehow made it worse. Eira's hands shook as she braced against the tree and pushed herself upright. Her legs trembled, but she locked her knees and forced herself still. She turned. The feral alpha stood in the shadows between two ancient pines, his shape more suggestion than form. Tall, broad-shouldered, utterly motionless. His eyes caught the faint light, pale gray, like winter ice over deep water. He didn't move closer. Didn't bare teeth or growl or any of the things she'd been taught feral alphas did. He just watched her with the patience of something that had no reason to rush. Eira's throat tightened. The mark there pulsed like a second heartbeat. "You're trespassing," he said. "I know. You're marked." She touched her throat reflexively, felt the residue of ash still tacky against her skin. "Yes." "Released or banished?" Eira hesitated. The distinction mattered here too, apparently. "Released." Something flickered across his face. Not sympathy. Recognition, maybe. He stepped forward into a shaft of moonlight, and Eira's breath caught. Scars cut across his jaw and disappeared beneath the collar of his dark coat. His hair was black, tied back, and streaked with silver at the temples. He looked like he'd been carved from stone and left out in the weather too long. But it was his stillness that unnerved her most. Alphas were volatile, reactive. This one moved like he'd forgotten how to waste energy. "You crossed the boundary unarmed," he said. Eira glanced down at her empty hands. She hadn't brought a blade. Hadn't brought anything. "I didn't think it would matter." "It matters." He circled her slowly, and Eira forced herself not to track him. Prey tracked. She kept her gaze forward, her breathing even. He stopped in front of her again. "Do you know the law of these lands?" Eira shook her head. "No weapon. No plea. No claim." His voice was flat, factual. "You enter with nothing, or you don't enter at all." "I didn't know." "You're still alive. So you followed it anyway." Eira blinked. Why did you come here?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't. "I had nowhere else to go," she said quietly. He studied her for a long moment, and Eira felt the weight of his assessment like a hand pressing against her ribs. "Your pack marked you to be taken." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes." "And you chose this instead?" "Yes." "Why?" Eira met his eyes. "Because if I die here, it's my choice. Not theirs." Silence stretched between them, thick and cold. Then the alpha turned and started walking. "Follow," he said over his shoulder. Eira didn't move. "Why?" He paused, glanced back. "Because standing there will kill you before dawn." "And following you won't?" His expression didn't change. "Not tonight." He continued walking, his footsteps steady and unhurried. Eira stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere left to run to. She looked back the way she'd come. The boundary stones were invisible in the dark, but she knew they were there. Behind them, the pack, the hunters, the inevitability of being claimed by someone who saw her as prey. Ahead, a feral alpha who hadn't killed her yet. Eira took a breath. And followed. The path wound deeper into darkness. Eira's legs burned with every step, but she forced herself to keep pace with the alpha ahead. He moved like smoke through the trees, silent, purposeful, never looking back to see if she followed. She could still run. Disappear into the underbrush. He hadn't bound her, hadn't threatened her. But something told her running would be the last mistake she ever made. The forest pressed close on all sides. No moonlight penetrated the canopy here. Only his silhouette kept her oriented, a darker shadow against the dark. Finally, he stopped. Eira nearly collided with his back. She stumbled, catching herself against a tree trunk. They stood in a small clearing, barely 10 paces across. Ancient stones jutted from the earth in a rough circle, carved with symbols Eira didn't recognize. The alpha turned to face her. For the first time, she saw him clearly. Scars traced his jaw and disappeared beneath his collar. His hair was black, tied back severely, streaked with silver despite him seeming no older than mid-30s. But it was his eyes that held her, pale gray, like winter ice, and utterly unreadable. He wasn't looking at her the way other alphas had. Not with hunger or calculation or contempt. He was studying her. Assessing something she couldn't name. "Sit," he said. It wasn't a command. Just a statement. Eira's legs gave out before she could decide whether to obey. She sank onto one of the stones, her breath coming ragged and shallow. The alpha remained standing. Watching. "You didn't bring weapons," he said. "I didn't think." Eira's voice cracked. She swallowed hard and tried again. "I didn't think it would matter." "It matters." "Why?" "Because feral law forbids weapons on first crossing. You followed it without knowing." Eira stared at him. "There's a law." "There is always law. The question is whether it serves justice or control." He tilted his head slightly. "The Council's law serves control. Feral law serves survival." "And which law says you don't kill trespassers?" "The old one. The true one." He stepped closer, and Eira forced herself not to flinch. "Any wolf who crosses feral lands unarmed and unclaimed may not be harmed. It is sanctuary law. Older than the packs. Older than the Council." "Then," Eira's throat tightened. "Then I'm safe." "You are sheltered. That is not the same as safe." "I don't understand." The alpha crouched in front of her, bringing them eye to eye. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the weariness that lived beneath his stillness. "The Council marked you," he said. "Why?" Eira hesitated. The answer felt too heavy to speak aloud. "I refused a claiming," she said finally. "Alpha Thorn wanted me. I said no. The elders said I had no right to refuse." "And so they released you?" "Yes." "Knowing you would be hunted?" "Yes." The alpha was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, his expression hardening. "The Council does not recognize sanctuary law. They will come for you." "I know. And when they do, they will demand I surrender you or claim you myself." Eira's stomach dropped. "And will you?" "No." The word was absolute. Final. Eira stared up at him. "Why not?" "Because claiming you would make me what they are. And I am not them." "But you'll," Eira's voice broke. "You'll lose everything. They'll cut you off, starve you out." "That," the alpha said quietly, "is my concern. Not yours." He turned toward the trees, then paused. "You asked me a question when we met," he said. Eira remembered. "Will you kill me?" "I didn't answer," he continued. "Because I wanted to see if you would beg. If you would plead or bargain or offer yourself to avoid death." And he looked back at her, and something flickered in those pale eyes. "Respect, maybe. You didn't. You stood there and waited for death like you'd already accepted it. Like you'd chosen it." His voice softened, just barely. "That is why you will be sheltered. Because you are not prey. You never were." Eira's chest tightened. "What's your name?" she whispered. "Kael," he said. "Kael Ravencrown." "I'm Eira. Eira Thornvale." "I know." He started walking again, and this time Eira stood and followed without hesitation. The path ahead was still dark. But for the first time since the elders had marked her, Eira didn't feel like she was walking toward death. She was walking toward something else entirely. Something the Council had never offered. Choice. Kael's territory wasn't what Eira expected. No fortress. No den carved into stone. Just a clearing ringed by ancient trees, with a structure built from salvaged wood and stone. Simple. Functional. Exposed. Too exposed. "Someone will see," Eira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They already have." Eira's head snapped toward the tree-line. She saw nothing, but felt it. Eyes watching from the shadows. Wolves who hadn't shown themselves but hadn't left either. Witnesses. Her stomach dropped. "If they report to the Council." "Let them." Kael pushed open the door and stepped inside without looking back. After a moment, Eira followed. The interior was sparse. A stone hearth, already burning low. A table with a single chair. Shelves lined with dried herbs and preserved meat. Everything had a place. Nothing was wasted. Kael moved to the hearth and added wood to the fire. Flames climbed, casting his shadow long across the floor. He didn't tell her to sit. Didn't offer comfort or explanation. He simply placed a bowl on the table, bread, dried meat, something that might have been cheese, and stepped back. Eira stared at it. What is this? Food. Why? Because you haven't eaten. That's not what I'm asking. Kael turned to face her fully, and the firelight cut harsh lines across his scarred features. Then ask clearly. Eira's hands curled into fists at her sides. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You owe me nothing. I'm marked released, her voice cracked. I'm worth less than prey to my own pack. So why shelter me? He was quiet for a long moment. Because you crossed unarmed, he said finally. Because you didn't beg. Because the Council's law is not the only law that exists. Feral law. Older law. Eira shook her head. Sheltering an unclaimed Omega, that's a violation. The Council will come for you. They will try. And when they do? Kael's expression didn't change. That's my concern. Not yours. Eira's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to push back, but exhaustion weighed her down like stones. She sank into the chair and stared at the food. Eat, Kael said. She didn't move. What do you want from me? Nothing. Everyone wants something. Not from you. Eira looked up sharply. His gaze was steady, unreadable. No hunger. No calculation. Just nothing. It unnerved her more than threats would have. You stay, Kael continued, his voice low and deliberate. You eat. You rest. You are not mine. You are not claimed. You are sheltered. That is all. For how long? As long as the law holds. And when it doesn't? Then you decide what comes next. Eira's breath hitched. No alpha had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever given her a choice that didn't come with conditions stitched into the seams. Why? She whispered. Kael turned back to the fire. Because shelter is not ownership. He said it like an oath. Like something he'd bled for. Eira's hands trembled as she picked up the bread. It was coarse, dense, real. She tore off a piece and ate slowly, feeling warmth spread through her chest for the first time in days. Outside, the wind shifted. Footsteps moved in the trees, deliberate, measured. The witnesses were still there. Kael heard them too. He didn't react. Eira set the bread down. They're going to tell the Council. Yes. You know what that means. Yes. And you're doing this anyway. Kael's jaw tightened, but he didn't look at her. The Council does not dictate law in feral lands. They'll try to change that. Let them try. Silence settled between them, heavy and fragile. Then, from the darkness beyond the clearing, a low howl rose, long, mournful, unmistakable. A messenger's call. Eira's blood went cold. Kael finally turned from the fire, his pale eyes catching the light. They're here, he said quietly. The Council had come. The messenger didn't enter the clearing. He stood at the boundary where firelight met shadow, his council insignia gleaming silver against dark leather. Young. Clean. Untested. Kael Ravencrown, he called out, voice steady despite the tremor Eira could hear beneath it. The Council summons you to answer for violation of pack law. Kael stepped outside, unhurried. Eira moved to the doorway but stayed inside, her fingers gripping the frame. I answer to no council, Kael said. The messenger's jaw tightened. You shelter an Omega without claim. That is forbidden. By whose law? Pack law. Council law. The law that governs all. Not here. Kael's voice cut clean through the messenger's recitation. This is feral land. Your laws end at the boundary stones. The Council does not recognize that distinction. The Council does not need to. Silence pressed down. The messenger shifted his weight, clearly unprepared for this level of defiance. He'd probably expected anger, defensiveness, something he could report back as instability. Instead, Kael simply stood there, immovable. You are jeopardizing the balance, the messenger tried again. If one alpha shelters an unclaimed omega, others will follow. The hierarchy will collapse. There will be chaos. There will be choice, Kael interrupted. That's what frightens them. The messenger's face flushed. The council speaker, Eldrick Stonevane, demands your presence at the next gathering. You will answer for this. I will not. Then you declare yourself enemy to all packs. I declare myself bound by older law, feral law, sanctuary law. Kael's voice dropped, deadly quiet. Any being who crosses feral lands unarmed and unclaimed may not be harmed. She came with nothing. She begged for nothing. She is sheltered. She is marked by a pack that released her. She belongs to no one. The messenger opened his mouth, closed it. He was outmatched and knew it. The council will not accept this, he said finally. The council has no authority here to reject it. You'll lose everything. Trade, allies, recognition. You'll be cut off. Then I'll be cut off. Eira's breath caught. She wanted to scream, to tell Kael to stop, that she wasn't worth this. But the words stuck in her throat. The messenger's eyes flicked toward the doorway, toward her. Disgust and something else flickered across his face. Pity, maybe. Or contempt. Is she worth it? He asked. Worth isolation? Worth becoming what they'll call you? Kael didn't look back at Eira. Didn't hesitate. This isn't about worth. It's about law. And law is either just or it's nothing. The messenger took a step back, then another. You've made your choice, Ravencrown. Now the council will make theirs. He turned and disappeared into the trees, his footsteps fading fast. Eira stepped outside, her legs unsteady. Kael, go inside. They're going to destroy you. Inside. She didn't move. I can leave. Right now. I'll cross back over the boundary aisle. Kael finally turned to look at her, and the expression on his face stopped her cold. You think this is about you? He asked quietly. Eira flinched. The council wanted you hunted, claimed, made an example of. They want every Omega to know there's no escape from their structure. His voice was flat, factual. I'm not sheltering you to save you, Eira. I'm sheltering you because the law they broke is older and truer than anything they've written. But you'll lose. What I lose is mine to lose. He walked past her, back toward the fire. Eira stood frozen in the clearing, the weight of what he'd just done crashing down on her like a felled tree. He'd chosen principle over survival. And she had no idea if that made him the most honorable wolf she'd ever met, or the most doomed. Inside, Kael added wood to the fire and said nothing. Eira sat down slowly, her mind racing. The council would come. Not with words next time. And when they did, she'd have to decide, stay and watch Kael burn for her. Or leave, and let the council win. They came at dawn. Eira woke to the sound of footsteps. Not one set but many. She sat up from where she'd fallen asleep near the hearth, pulse hammering. Kael was already outside. She moved to the doorway and stopped cold. The clearing was ringed with wolves. Not council wolves. Not pack alphas in their formal leathers. These were different, scarred, silent, watching. Rogues. Feral wolves. Some stood alone. Others in pairs. None wore insignias or colors. They'd come from the deep territories. Kael stood in the center of the clearing, unmoving. Waiting. An older wolf stepped forward, female, gray-haired, with eyes like flint. She looked at Kael, then at Eira, then back. You invoked sanctuary law, she said. Her voice carried, deliberate. Speak it aloud. For the record. Kael's jaw tightened, but he didn't hesitate. I shelter Eira Thornvale under feral law. She crossed unarmed, unclaimed, and unbound. No harm may come to her while she remains in these lands. I do not claim her. I do not own her. I offer shelter, and nothing more." The older wolf nodded slowly. "And you understand the cost?" "Yes. Isolation. Severance. The council will hunt your name." "Let them." Silence. Then the older wolf turned to face the others. "I witnessed this," she said, her voice ringing clear. "Sanctuary has been granted under the old law. The law that predates pack structure. The law that cannot be rewritten by council decree." One by one, the other wolves stepped forward. "I witness," said a scarred male with a torn ear. "I witness," said a younger female, barely more than a rogue herself. "I witness. I witness." The declarations came like hammer strikes, each one binding. Eira's throat tightened. She didn't understand the full weight of what was happening, but she felt it, ancient, immovable, true. When the last wolf had spoken, the older female turned back to Kael. "The law is witnessed," she said. "It cannot be undone. Not by council vote. Not by force. Not by time." Her expression softened, just slightly. "You've made yourself a symbol, Ravencrown. Whether you wanted to or not." Kael said nothing. The wolves began to disperse, melting back into the trees as silently as they'd come. But the older female lingered. She looked at Eira, still standing in the doorway. "You're free to leave whenever you choose, girl. The shelter is not a cage. Remember that." Then she too was gone. Eira stepped into the clearing, her legs unsteady. The space felt different now, heavier somehow. "Sacred. What just happened?" she whispered. Kael stared at the treeline. "They bound the law. Publicly. The council can't undo it now without declaring war on every feral territory." "You knew they'd come?" "I hoped." "Why?" He finally looked at her, and something flickered in his pale eyes. Exhaustion, maybe. Or resignation. "Because witnesses make law real. Words can be ignored. Testimony cannot." Eira wrapped her arms around herself. "The council will retaliate." "Yes. They'll cut you off. Starve you out. Destroy everything you." "Eira." His voice was quiet but firm. "I knew the price before I spoke the law." "Then why?" "Because some things are worth more than comfort." He turned toward the trees, his shoulders tense. "And because I will not become what they are." Eira's chest tightened. She wanted to thank him. To tell him she understood, even though she didn't. To promise she'd make this worth it somehow. But the words felt hollow. Instead, she asked the only question that mattered. "What happens now?" Kael was quiet for a long moment. "Now," he said slowly, "the council decides whether to accept the law, or break it." "And if they break it?" His jaw clenched. "Then we find out if honor still means anything." Eira looked at the empty clearing, at the places where wolves had stood and spoken truth into being. She thought about leaving. About walking away before the retaliation came. But something had shifted. The law was witnessed. She was protected. And Kael, impossible, stubborn, principled Kael, had chosen to stand alone against an entire system. For her. For the law. For something bigger than either of them. Eira took a breath. "I won't leave," she said quietly. Kael turned sharply. "You should." "I won't. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "They marked me. They released me. They made me into this. And you," she swallowed hard. "You're the first wolf who's ever treated me like I had a choice." Kael stared at her, something unreadable crossing his face. "You still have one," he said finally. "Don't waste it on loyalty." "It's not loyalty." Eira met his eyes. "It's principle." His expression shifted, surprise maybe, or respect. Before he could respond, a howl split the morning air. Not from the feral lands. From the south. From council territory. They were coming. The council didn't send warriors. They sent Eldrick Stonevane himself. He arrived with an entourage of 6, all senior pack alphas, all wearing the council's silver. They stopped at the boundary stones, making no move to cross into feral lands. Smart. Kael met them at the border, and Eira followed despite his warning look. If this was about her, she would face it. Eldrick was older than she'd expected, his hair more white than grey, his face lined with decades of authority. But his eyes were sharp, calculating. A wolf who'd survived by knowing which battles to fight and which to manipulate. Kael Ravencrown, Eldrick said, his voice carrying easily across the boundary. We meet at last. Kael said nothing. Eldrick's mouth curved, not quite a smile. The feral wolf who thinks himself above pack law. How long has it been since you attended a gathering? 5 years? 6. I have no need of gatherings. Clearly. Eldrick's gaze shifted to Eira. And now you harbor fugitives. She's not a fugitive. She was released. A technicality that doesn't grant you the right to shelter her. Feral law grants me that right. Eldrick's expression hardened. Feral law is a myth. A relic. The council alone determines. The council, Kael interrupted, his voice cold, has no authority in these lands. You know this. Or you would have crossed the boundary already. The alphas behind Eldrick shifted, uncomfortable. He raised a hand, stilling them. Let's speak plainly, Eldrick said. You've created a precedent that threatens the entire pack structure. If Omegas believe they can flee to feral lands and receive protection without claim, the hierarchy collapses. Alphas lose authority. Packs fracture. Chaos follows. Or, Kael said quietly, Omegas gain choice. And packs learn to earn loyalty instead of demanding it. Eldrick's jaw tightened. Pretty words. But the reality is simpler. He gestured broadly. As of this moment, no pack will trade with feral territory. No alliance will hold. No wolf under council governance may cross these boundaries or offer you aid. You are severed. Isolated. Cut off completely. Eira's stomach dropped. Kael's expression didn't change. I expected nothing less. You'll starve by winter. Then I'll starve. Your stubbornness helps no one, Ravencrown. Least of all her. Eldrick looked at Eira again. Send her back. We'll find her a suitable placement. A decent alpha, fair terms. Better than death by isolation. Eira's hands curled into fists. I don't want your placement. Eldrick's eyes narrowed. You'd choose this? Cold, starvation, exile? For what? Pride. For choice, Eira said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Something you've never offered. Silence stretched taut. Then Eldrick smiled, thin, dangerous. Very well. Let me be clear about what you've both chosen. He turned back to Kael. No trade. No medicine. No aid. When winter comes and your stores run empty, no pack will hear your calls. When sickness comes, no healer will cross the boundary. You will have nothing but your precious principles to sustain you. I've had less, Kael said. Eldrick studied him for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. You're a fool, Ravencrown. And fools die alone. Better alone than owned. Eldrick's face hardened. He turned without another word, his entourage following. They disappeared into the trees. Eira stood frozen, the weight of what had just been declared crushing down on her. Kael. Don't. This is my fault. If I just. You did nothing wrong. His voice was flat, controlled. They did this. Not you. But you'll lose everything. I already told you. What I lose is mine to lose. Eira's throat burned. She wanted to scream, to rage, to somehow undo the choice that had brought her here. But she couldn't. Kael walked back toward the clearing, his steps heavy. Eira didn't follow immediately. She stood at the boundary, staring at the stones that separated feral land from pack territory. She could cross. Right now. End this before winter came. Before Kael paid the ultimate price for sheltering her. It would be easy. and it would destroy everything he'd stood for. Eira closed her eyes, her decision crystallizing like ice in her chest. She turned away from the boundary. But not toward Kael's shelter. Toward the deeper forest. Toward the path that would take her beyond feral lands entirely. If she left on her own terms, truly alone, claimed by no one, then Kael's sacrifice would mean something. And the council would have no reason to continue the siege. She took one step. Then another. Behind her, Kael's voice cut through the silence. "Where are you going?" Eira didn't turn around. "Somewhere you won't have to starve for." She kept walking. And this time, Kael didn't follow. Eira walked through the night. Not toward Packlands. Not back across the boundary stones. Deeper into the wild, where even feral law grew thin and the forest belonged to nothing but itself. Her feet ached. Her throat burned from cold air. But she kept moving. Behind her, Kael's territory faded into darkness. He hadn't followed. Hadn't called out again. He'd simply let her go, exactly as he'd promised he would. That shouldn't have hurt. But it did. Eira stopped at the edge of a frozen stream, her breath fogging the air. She knelt and broke through the ice with her fist, gasping at the cold, and drank deeply. The water tasted like stone and winter. She sat back on her heels, staring at her reflection in the broken ice, pale, exhausted, marked. Still marked, even here where no pack law reached. "You're going the wrong way." Eira spun. The older female wolf from the witnessing stood at the treeline, her gray hair catching moonlight. She looked unbothered by the cold, by the late hour, by Eira's shock. "I'm not going back," Eira said. "Good. You shouldn't." Eira blinked. "Then why are you here?" "Because you're walking in circles." The wolf stepped closer. "You've been moving parallel to the boundary for the last 2 miles. If you wanted to leave, you would have crossed by now." Eira's jaw tightened. "I can't go back. The council will use me against him." "They already are. Whether you're there or not." "Then leaving solves nothing?" "Leaving solves exactly what you want it to solve." The older wolf crouched, meeting Eira's eyes. "It ends your guilt. It lets you tell yourself you did the noble thing. But it doesn't actually help him." "And staying does?" "Staying proves the point." Eira shook her head. "What point?" "That he'll starve for a stranger. That shelter without claim is possible. That the old law still holds. That one wolf's choice can matter." The older wolf's expression softened. "He didn't do this for you, girl. He did it for every Omega who comes after you. Every wolf who'll need sanctuary and won't find it under council law." Eira's throat closed. "I didn't ask for that." "No one ever does. But it's done now. The law is spoken. Witnessed. Bound." She stood slowly. "The question isn't whether you stay or go. It's whether you choose freely, or run because you're afraid." "I'm not afraid." "Liar." Eira flinched. The older wolf turned to leave, then paused. "He'll survive winter. Feral wolves always do. But he'll do it knowing you chose to walk away. Make sure that's the story you want told." She disappeared into the trees. Eira sat alone by the frozen stream, her hands trembling. She thought about Packlands, where alphas would still be hunting. Where the council would find her, place her, claim her all over again. She thought about the deep wild, where no law existed and survival was all that mattered. She thought about Kael's clearing, where firelight burned and witnesses had spoken truth into being. Where she'd been sheltered without being owned. Where she'd been given choice. Eira stood slowly. She looked back the way she'd come, toward feral lands, toward Kael's territory, toward the clearing that had become something she couldn't name. Then she looked forward, toward the endless forest and the freedom it promised. One step. That's all it would take. One step, and she'd be gone. Truly alone. Truly free. Eira took a breath. And turned around. Dawn was breaking when she reached the boundary stones. Kael stood in the clearing, exactly where she'd left him. He hadn't moved. Hadn't gone inside. He simply stood there, silhouetted against the rising sun, waiting. Eira stopped at the edge of the trees. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Kael's voice, quiet and rough, "You came back." "I did." "Why?" Eira stepped into the clearing. "Because leaving would have been easier. And I'm done taking the easy path." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or relief. "The council won't change their terms," he said. "I know. Winter will be hard." "I know. You could still leave. Find another way." Eira met his eyes. "So could you." Kael's jaw tightened. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Then we stay," he said. "We stay." The sun crested the treeline, spilling gold across the clearing. And for the first time since she'd been marked, Eira felt something settle in her chest. Not safety. Not ownership. Not even certainty. Just choice. Pure, absolute hers. The first snow came early. Eira woke to silence, the deep, muffled quiet that only winter brought. She rose from her corner near the hearth and looked outside. The clearing was buried in white. Kael was already up, checking the stores. His face was unreadable, but Eira had learned to read the tension in his shoulders. They had enough. "Barely. I can hunt," she offered. "Not in this snow. I'm not helpless." He looked at her, and something almost like amusement crossed his face. "I know." Over the weeks, they'd fallen into a rhythm. She gathered wood, prepared meals, maintained the fire. He hunted when weather allowed, reinforced the shelter, kept watch. They spoke little, but the silence between them had shifted from uncomfortable to companionable. Neither mentioned the council. Neither mentioned leaving. They simply survived. But the world outside the clearing was changing. The runner arrived on the third day of snow. Young female, wearing no colors. She stopped at the boundary and called out, "I seek sanctuary." Kael emerged from the shelter, Eira behind him. The runner was shaking. From cold or fear, Eira couldn't tell. Her left arm hung at an odd angle. Broken, maybe. "Who marked you?" Kael asked. "Ironwood Pack. I was," her voice cracked. "I refused a claiming. They said I had no right to refuse." Eira's stomach twisted. Kael was silent for a long moment. Then, crossed the boundary. Unarmed. The runner staggered forward, nearly collapsing. Eira moved without thinking, catching her before she fell. "Inside," Kael said. They brought her to the hearth. Eira heated water while Kael examined the runner's arm. Broken, as she'd thought. He set it with quiet efficiency, and the runner bit down on leather to keep from screaming. When it was done, the runner looked between them with wide eyes. "Is it true?" she whispered. "That you shelter without claiming?" "Yes," Kael said. "Why?" "Because the law allows it. And because no one should be owned." Tears streaked the runner's face. They said it was a lie. A trap. That feral alphas would, she couldn't finish. "You're safe here," Eira said quietly. "Until you choose otherwise." The runner stared at her, then at Kael, then broke down completely. She wasn't the last. Over the following weeks, 3 more came. An Omega fleeing a forced bond. A young Alpha who'd refused to participate in a hunt. A rogue who'd witnessed council brutality and spoken against it. Each one arrived broken in some way. Each one was sheltered. Kael's territory became something it had never been, a refuge. The council's silence was deafening. Then the whispers started. Eira heard them from a passing trader who'd ignored the council's isolation order. Risky, but profitable. "Packs are fracturing," he told them, keeping his voice low. Younger wolves questioning why release means death. Omegas asking why claiming is mandatory. Some alphas are refusing to enforce the old protocols. "The council?" Kael asked. Panicking. "They've called emergency sessions. Some want to declare war on feral lands. Others say that would prove your point." The trader shook his head. "You've become a symbol, Ravencrown. Whether you wanted it or not." After he left, Eira found Kael standing at the boundary stones, staring south toward pack territory. You didn't want this, she said. No. But it's happening anyway. Yes. She stood beside him. What now? Now we see if the council chooses adaptation or destruction. And if they choose destruction? Kael's jaw tightened. Then we've already won. Because even if they destroy us, they can't unspeak the law. It's witnessed. Others will remember. Others will try. Eira looked at the sheltered wolves inside, for now, besides herself. All alive. All unclaimed. All choosing to stay. It's not enough, she said quietly. What isn't? This. One clearing. 5 wolves. It's not enough to change everything. It's enough to start. Eira turned to him. What if more come? What if 10 come? 20? You can't shelter them all. No, Kael agreed. But others can. Understanding dawned slowly. You think other feral territories will follow? Some already are. The witnesses spread word. Sanctuary is being offered in 3 other territories now. Small. Fragile. But real. Eira's breath caught. The council will. The council is losing control. Slowly. But irreversibly. A howl rose in the distance. Not from packlands, but from feral territory. Different. Questioning. Kael's head tilted. Another one. So soon. Word travels fast when it offers hope. They stood together, watching the tree lean. A figure emerged from the snow, smaller, younger. Another Omega, by the scent. She stopped at the boundary stones and called out, voice shaking. I seek sanctuary. Kael looked at Eira. For the first time since she'd arrived, she saw something like pride in his eyes. You answer, he said quietly. Eira's throat tightened. She stepped forward, her voice carrying across the clearing. Cross the boundary. Unarmed. You will be sheltered, not claimed. The Omega crossed. And the world shifted a little more. Spring came slowly to feral lands. The snow melted in patches, revealing earth that had survived another winter. The sheltered wolves, 7 now, began to disperse. Some stayed. Others left to find their own paths, unchained and unclaimed. Eira watched them go with something between pride and grief. The clearing felt larger, with fewer bodies. Quieter. Kael stood at the boundary stones, as he often did now. Watching. Waiting. The isolation order still stood, but it had grown meaningless. Traders came anyway. Messages arrived from other feral territories. The council's grip had loosened, thread by thread. Eira approached, her footsteps soft on new grass. They're calling it the Sanctuary Rebellion, she said. Kael's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Rebellions require violence. We've offered none. That's what makes it dangerous. He looked at her. You could leave now. The council's attention is divided. You could cross into neutral territory, start over somewhere they'd never find you. I could, Eira agreed. But you won't. No. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable. Never that, anymore. Why not? Kael asked quietly. Eira considered the question. Months ago, she would have had no answer. Months ago, she'd been prey, marked and running. Now? Because I'm not finished, she said simply. Kael studied her, something unreadable in his pale eyes. Finished with what? Learning what freedom looks like. She turned to face him fully. You gave me shelter. Safety. Choice. But I stayed for something else. What? To see if I could become something other than what they made me. And Eira smiled, small but real. I'm still finding out. Kael nodded slowly. Then, for the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain. I'm leaving, he said. Eira's breath caught. What? Not permanently. But there are other territories now. Other alphas offering sanctuary who need guidance. The law needs to be witnessed, spoken, bound properly. He paused. I'll return. But the clearing will be empty for a time. Understanding settled over her. You want me to hold it? I'm asking you to. Why me? Because you understand what sanctuary means. Not as the one giving it, but as the one who needed it. His voice softened. Because you're not me, and that matters. Eira's throat tightened. She looked at the clearing, the shelter, the boundary stones, the space that had become something like home. If I stay, others will come, she said. Yes. I'm not an alpha. I can't enforce the law the way you do. You don't need to enforce it. You need to witness it. To speak it. To let others know it exists. He met her eyes. That's all sanctuary ever required. Eira wanted to argue. To say she wasn't ready, wasn't strong enough, wasn't what this place needed. But she looked at the boundary stones and remembered crossing them. Remembered expecting death and finding choice instead. Remembered becoming something other than prey. How long will you be gone? She asked. Months, maybe. Long enough to ensure the other territories understand the law. That they don't twist it into something it's not. And then. Kael's expression shifted, something almost like warmth. Then I come back. If you're still here. Where else would I be? Free, he said simply. Wherever that takes you. Eira's chest tightened. She understood what he was offering. Not chains. Not promises. Just possibility. I'll be here, she said. Kael nodded once. Then he turned toward the deeper forest. Kael, Eira called. He stopped, glanced back. Thank you. For not claiming me. His expression softened in a way she'd never seen before. Thank you, he said quietly, for choosing to stay anyway. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading into the trees. Eira stood alone in the clearing, watching the space where he'd been. The sun climbed higher. Birds called from the canopy. The world continued, indifferent and alive. And then, faint but clear, a voice called from the boundary. I seek sanctuary. Eira turned. A young male stood at the stones, thin, scarred, terrified. He wore no pack colors. Carried no weapons. I was told, he called out, voice shaking, that feral lands offer shelter without claim. Is it true? Eira walked to the edge of the clearing, her heart steady. It's true, she said. The male's shoulders sagged with relief. Will you kill me if I cross? No. Will you claim me? No. Then why shelter me at all? Eira smiled. Because shelter is not ownership. And because you have the right to choose what comes next. The male stared at her, tears streaming down his face. Cross the boundary, Eira said, her voice clear and certain. Unarmed. You will be safe here. Until you decide otherwise. The male crossed. Behind him, the forest whispered with movement. More would come. They always did now. Eira looked at the clearing. Her clearing, at least for now, and felt something settle in her chest. Not possession. Not permanence. Just purpose. The council could try to undo what had been built here. They could threaten, isolate, destroy. But they could not unspeak the law. And they could not erase what every sheltered wolf would carry with them when they left. The knowledge that protection without ownership was possible. That choice existed, even when the world said it didn't. That freedom was not permission granted, but a right reclaimed. Eira turned back to the clearing, to the wolf who'd crossed the boundary, to the others who would come. And she began again. A law witnessed cannot be unwritten. A choice made cannot be unmade. And a world that learned sanctuary exists. Can never go back to what it was. Thank you for staying until the end. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there for you right now? If this story pulled you in, subscribe for more werewolf stories, and share it with someone who'd love this world.